Crossovers have been a staple for various genres, and the horror genre is no exception. It is always an exciting prospect for the horror fans to witness some of their favorite horror icons feature together. And even though these movies don't necessarily get a lot of critical acclaim, they offer loads of entertainment for the fans. In this video, we have compiled a list of some of the best horror crossovers, and our list includes horror of every kind, ranging from the paranormal to creatures and psycho killers or even monsters. Enjoy the journey into this wild territory of horror, where the characters face off or team up to double up the fun. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Freddy vs. Jason, 2003. When it comes to horror crossovers, this is easily the gold standard because the idea of putting together two of the most terrifying horror icons simply steals the show. The story picks up after Freddy Krueger's defeat that has landed him in hell, and he is now unable to infiltrate the dreams of children. Posing as Jason's mother, Freddy resurrects Jason and manipulates him to go to Elm Street and continue the killing spree. However, things soon take a nasty turn for the duo as Jason and Freddy find themselves in a standoff. Now, they are not only killing innocents, but also trying to kill each other as a vicious struggle begins. This is guilty pleasure at its finest, and you shouldn't really question trivial plot holes and loose ends. The nature of the narrative is more of a horror comedy, and you might be disappointed if you expect things to be genuinely scary. Two of the biggest 80s horror legends battle each other in whatever form they can, and their face-off is always going to be worth your time. Each of them has their weaknesses, and they know very well how to exploit the same. Robert Englund as Freddy is amazing as always, and the director Ronnie Yu knows how to titillate the fans. The tongue-in-cheek humor adds to the fun quotient, and although we wouldn't spoil who wins the final battle, let's just say there will be enough action to keep you hooked till the very end. If you want the ultimate battle between evil and more evil, this is just the perfect movie to enjoy over a few beers. Alien vs. Predator, 2004. We finally find out what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object as the two most powerful extraterrestrial creatures are caught up in a battle for supremacy. It all starts when Wayland Industries discovers a buried pyramid in the Antarctic and sends a group of experts to investigate. They find out that the place is inhabited by an unknown alien species, and before long, the aliens begin hunting down the team members. Meanwhile, the Predators have also arrived to claim the skulls of the aliens as trophies, and the humans soon realize that they are stuck in the middle of a war between the ferocious aliens and the technologically advanced warriors who hunt for sport and honor, the Predators. This movie often gets a bad rep for being a commercial gimmick, but we strongly disagree. The storyline is pretty decent, and so is the execution by the director Paul W.S. Anderson, who knows his way around sci-fi horror flicks. He later revealed that Arnold Schwarzenegger also offered to reprise his role as Dutch from the original Predator movie if he lost the California governor election, but he went on to win, and we missed out on the cameo. Nevertheless, the war between the aliens and Predators does not disappoint, even though the aliens have been shown as slightly more powerful. The amazing set design and tons of action make this a must-watch for the space nerds, and you wouldn't even notice the below-par dialogue. Overall, it is certainly not as bad as some people make it to be, and you might also check out the sequel while you're giving this a try. Godzilla vs. Kong, 2021. It is a mouth-watering contest when the clash of the titans heats up, and the epic face-off between Godzilla and Kong will perhaps be remembered as one of the finest crossovers in cinematic history. The mythic adversaries meet while the world is still coming to terms with the battle between Ghidorah and Godzilla. Humanity attempts to coexist with the titans, but Godzilla soon begins his reign of terror yet again, and Kong is summoned determined to offer some resistance. From a memorable trip to Skull Island to a little girl communicating with Kong to tell him about the dangers, the movie comes with a spectacular narrative as the fate of the world hangs in the balance. The plot becomes secondary when the action is so great and the visuals are stunning, but Godzilla vs. Kong actually comes with a decent storyline. The less than 2-hour runtime never gets boring, and the action sequences are simply to die for. The monster madness is worth all your time, and the only shortcoming might be a bit too much of human interference in the movie. We usually don't heap praises on CGI, but the special effects are just mind-blowing in this movie, and the theater experience was unforgettable. The best thing about the two opponents is that they don't overpower each other so easily, and this makes the fights interesting every single time. We expect a lot more from this cinematic universe in the future, and the journey has indeed been promising so far.
Now what are you putting on for? Now take the mask off!
Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, 1948. There was a proper horror crossover in cinema before we even properly knew what a crossover was. Back in 1948, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein gave us the first taste of what a bizarre crossover looks like, and it might just be termed as the pioneer in this regard. It all starts after a pair of crates from a House of Horrors museum are mishandled by Wilbur, the director of the museum. When Dracula and Frankenstein are released as a consequence, a comedy of errors follows, and the end result is a delightful horror comedy from the good old black and white era. Bud Abbott and Lou Costello were big names in the acting world back in the day, and their performance is easily the highlight of this movie. This movie is often regarded as one of the finest horror comedies ever made, and for a good reason. The narrative has fun with the monsters instead of making fun of them, which makes it all the more enjoyable for the fans. Some of the scenes truly stand out, such as Frankenstein's initial reaction to Lou Costello or the final chase sequence. It's not often that we get to see the Wolfman, Frankenstein, and Dracula in the same frame, and you can watch the movie for this reason alone. Even if you're not a big fan of Abbott and Costello, the comic and classic elements in the movie are enough reasons to revisit this gem from the past. Lake Placid vs. Anaconda 2015. We have seen enough of Anaconda and Lake Placid movies to know what the mighty serpent and the gigantic crocodile are capable of, and this movie brings the two together in an epic chaos. The movie takes you through the aftermath of a giant crocodile and a genetically modified anaconda breaking out of captivity and going on a rampage in a nearby lake. The two beasts engage in a fight to death, and the sheriff must find a way to prevent the town from getting destroyed as collateral damage. Of course, there are human lives at stake, and the mouth-watering contest between these two creatures is only getting started. Are the Lake Placid and Anaconda franchises the finest in horror history? They absolutely aren't, but somehow, both the movie series managed to survive long enough to ensure a crossover. The reason is simple enough. The makers know exactly what the fans love, and we get plenty of blood and gore aside from the usual creature horror stuff. This movie is also made on similar lines, and the story is nothing amazing to appreciate. Equally underwhelming are the acting and visuals, and the only thing that keeps things going is the anticipation of the two beasts locking horns. The fight scenes do not disappoint, and the silly CGI actually adds to the fun. If you want to enjoy some mindless creature horror entertainment with a dash of corny lines and genre staples, this is just the right crossover for you.
Where does the hat been?
Gingerdead Man vs. Evil Bong, 2013. Do you remember the exploits of the Gingerdead Man? Well, this time he is back for revenge against Sarah Lee, the only survivor in the movie. And he is vengeful because she has made him live his life in the body of a gingerbread man. The story could have been simple enough, but Sarah is not easy prey. She teams up with Larnell and unleashes the evil Bong, EB, to save the day. When the bodies start piling up courtesy of the Gingerdead man, the dastardly Bong might prove to be quite a handful to fix the situation. What happens in this high-stakes encounter as the two underdogs of the horror world clash? The director of this movie, Charles Band, is known for his skills in perfecting such movies, and he does not disappoint. The two antagonists from two full moon franchises are pitted against each other in a perfect setup, but you will find out that the actual battle is more between the humans and them both. In fact, there is not much of a fight between the two, and one could say that the title is slightly misleading. The movie is purposely stupid at times, and we would be lying if we said it doesn't make things hilarious. This is true guilty pleasure and stoner's comedy at its finest, and the plot is not even supposed to be deep or original. If you happen to be a fan of the franchises, you might just try your hand at this bizarre experiment and find out for yourself whether you like it or not. Dracula vs. Frankenstein, 1971. Dracula is possibly one of the earliest and most terrifying horror icons out there, and it only adds to the excitement when Frankenstein is thrown into the picture as well. Dracula vs. Frankenstein accomplishes just that. Wheelchair-bound mad scientist Dr. Dracula, who is the last descendant of Dr. Frankenstein, is made to revive Frankenstein's monster by Dracula. Later, Dr. Dracula sends the duo to get revenge on the man who had discredited him and crippled him earlier. What is the outcome when two notorious horror icons are put together? We all love our share of campy and corny horror flicks, and Dracula vs. Frankenstein showed the way for many more to follow. This is one of those movies that are so bad that they are good, and you shouldn't expect much out of the plot. It is almost forced to bring the two monsters together, and the end result is not so disappointing. There are some fine actors involved in the mix of things, such as J. Carol Naish and Xander Vorkov, and a cast of seasoned veterans makes things better for the narrative. We must admit that the production values in this movie are almost non-existent, and it might be annoying to watch Dracula with his plastic teeth and comical practical effects. All in all, this movie is a bit of an acquired taste, and we only recommend this for the most dedicated and hardened horror fans out there. Sadako vs. Kayako, 2016. Both the Ju-on and Ring series have a special place in the hearts of horror fans, and this movie brings about a crossover that we never expected. The story follows the terrifying ordeal after the cursed videotape is changing hands yet again, bringing back the dreaded Sadako Yamamura in action. As more bodies start to pile up, it is discovered that the only way to deal with Sadako is to pit her against another vengeful spirit so that they can destroy each other. Kayako's psyche is brought into the narrative as the rival spirit, but the plan doesn't exactly produce the desired result. The two curses combined, and Sadako and Kayako become a single entity called Sadakaya. And even without spoiling things, we can tell you that the movie lures the viewers with the possibility of a sequel. The movie was first teased as an April Fool's joke, and little did we know that it was actually going to be made. All things aside, credit is due for the director Koji Shiraishi for keeping the secret and executing a challenging task of combining two horror greats. There is a decent element of thrill and suspense in the narrative, and even though both franchises have passed their prime, this one is a genuine effort to revive things. The two separate curses have been handled quite well, and the jump scares are enough to leave you rattled. At times, the movie ends up being a tad bit comical, but this is not made out to be like a horror comedy, and the overall idea is to create a fearful entity who can be utilized again in the future. The horror fans who are into bizarre crossovers should definitely check out this effort simply to experience Sadako and Kayako in one frame. Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, 1943. Larry Talbot, aka the Wolfman, finds himself in a tricky situation after he is accused of murder, and all he wants is to die in peace. He encounters a gypsy named Maleva who offers to help him. They head out to find Dr. Frankenstein, but it turns out that he is now dead himself. Now, Talbot seeks out his daughter, Baroness Elsa Frankenstein, and he wishes to borrow the secrets from the late doctor's journal about the mysteries of life and death. In a crucial twist, we find out that while Frankenstein is dead, his monster might still be alive, and he wants to live, unlike Talbot. The end result, an epic showdown that provides a delightful horror crossover for the fans. Few are aware of the amazing works by Universal during wartime, and this movie is among their best creature features with a dash of horror. It serves as a direct sequel to The Wolfman and the Ghost of Frankenstein, and Chaney Jr. carries this movie single-handedly as the Wolfman courtesy of his brilliant acting skills. The rest of the cast is also impressive, and the narrative is in safe hands with director Roy William Neill, who already made a name for himself with his Sherlock Holmes movies. The fun and charming ambiance of the film is just perfect, and the only minor drawback might be the abrupt ending. With the creepy beginning and the funny development, this blast from the past is worth experiencing all over again. Dollman vs. Demonic Toys, 1993. This peculiar mix of franchises offers a chance to a bizarre plot that would have only featured in the wildest imaginations of the fans. The demonic toys have returned yet again, and this time around they have created a reign of terror one more time. As this evil presence is cooped up in a deserted toy factory, a policewoman named Judith Gray gets him help from an unlikely source, Dollman. Now, Dollman has to find a way to prevent the toys from summoning the powers of darkness on Earth. The director Charles Band and the Full Moon universe is a combination made in heaven for all the B-horror fans out there. This particular film offers a nice mix of the franchises, and it is a fun little fantasy expedition that never falls short of entertainment. Tim Thomerson rocks big time in this movie, and from the time the demonic toys are resurrected and create havoc, the narrative becomes quite interesting. The movie has recycled loads of footage from the films Dollman, 1991, Bad Channels, 1992, and Demonic Toys, 1992. But you wouldn't mind the cost cutting. However, the short runtime of just over an hour means that some details are skipped, and the closure might not be all that appealing. Overall, it is all typical Full Moon fun, and you can overlook all the flaws in favor of all the enjoyment that is on offer.
Let it begin.
The Monster Squad, 1987. Given how Dracula is the most legendary of all horror icons out there, the most crossovers in the genre have featured him in the mix. It is the same for the Monster Squad, which tells the story of a club of preteens who come across the diary of Van Helsing, the man who famously took on Count Dracula. They learn about an amulet that possesses great power, and now Dracula also seeks to obtain the amulet so that he can take over the world. In order to fulfill his plans, he assembles a team of other horror villains like the Mummy, Gillman, and the Wolfman. He even unleashes Frankenstein's monster, but he is reluctant to help Dracula. After finding kindness from the kids, Frankenstein's monster joins the Monster Squad, and they all lead a fight against Dracula to save the world. This movie is essentially a horror comedy, even though the plot sounds serious enough to be a proper horror flick. The director, Fred Deckard, might be a familiar name for those who are familiar with the cult classic 80s movie Night of the Creeps, and he creates a masterpiece yet again. The narrative is highly entertaining, and the funny story has a nice mix of adventure, dark comedy, and horror. It also serves as a wonderful tribute to the Universal monsters, and the dialogues and some memorable scenes make this a must-watch for all the horror fans out there. The special effects are impressive, and if you want to see a number of horror villains together in action, you need to look no further. Hotel Transylvania 2012. This animated movie, featuring one of the greatest horror crossovers of all time, became so popular that it spawned an entire franchise. The plot revolves around Count Dracula, who runs a high-end resort for monsters, and unlike his usual terrifying avatar, he is portrayed as a loving father in the movie. However, he is extremely overprotective of his daughter Mavis, and all hell breaks loose after a human named Johnny enters the hotel. Mavis shows signs of falling for this guy, and Dracula tries his best to ensure that such a thing never happens. What follows next is a comedy of errors and enough monster appearances to make your day. This film is best known for the kind of wholesome family entertainment that it offers throughout the narrative. The story is innovative, and there are plenty of hilarious moments to provide a laugh riot. There are also elements of drama and heartwarming moments, which you normally don't expect from such lighthearted animated flicks. Adam Sandler is the voice of Dracula in the film, and he steals the show with a thundering performance. It is fascinating to get all the monsters together, and you will find everyone from Frankenstein and his wife Eunice to Wayne and Wanda Werewolf and their massive family. Other notable features include Griffin the Invisible Man, Murray the Mummy, and all the zombies and monsters that serve Dracula. The animation quality is top-notch, and overall, this movie and the entire franchise deserves a place on your watch list.
3, 2.
Mega Shark vs. Giant Octopus 2009. This movie might not have a great reputation, but it tells an entertaining story in the simplest way possible. Two massive prehistoric beasts are thawed out of the ice, and they embark on a violent journey across the Californian coast, terrorizing the people out there. The Mega Shark and the Giant Octopus must be hunted down before it's too late, and meanwhile, these prehistoric creatures also fight each other for supremacy in the waters. The title is quite indicative of what you should expect from this movie, and anyone going in searching for a cult classic is bound to be disappointed. It is your typical creature feature with loads of blood and gore, and some corny shots of the titular monsters every now and then. The low budget is evident in every scene, and the CGI is remarkably bad, even by 90s standards. You will find yourself laughing your guts out when the two creatures face off, and even the dialogues are ridiculous. In short, Mega Shark vs. Giant Octopus is actually one of those movies that are so bad that they are enjoyable, and there is no other way to go through this wacky experience. Destroy All Monsters 1968. If you are a fan of the Japanese monsterverse, this movie introduces a crossover of epic proportions. The scientists face an unprecedented threat when a race of she-aliens called the Kylax manages to brainwash the worst of Earth's monsters. The likes of Godzilla, Rodan, Mothra, and other obscure Japanese monsters are sent out to attack various cities, and a group of brave astronauts stand between them and total destruction. Aside from the watchable storyline and decent production values, the movie is also quite historic because it is regarded as the last entry in the golden age of kaiju films. Watching some of the biggest stars of the monsterverse, such as Godzilla, Rodan, and the evil three-headed serpent King Ghidorah in action together is an unforgettable experience. The jaw-dropping scenes are fast and furious enough for the adrenaline rush, and we love how the narrative incorporates the backstories of the monsters as much as possible. Visually, the movie leaves nothing to complain about, and we are amazed by the immaculate set designs and special effects. If you love an extra helping of kaiju every once in a while, Destroy All Monsters is the perfect movie to check out. House of Dracula 1945. This is yet another horror crossover featuring the iconic vampire Count Dracula, and this time around he has been paired with Lawrence Talbot, aka the Wolfman. Both of them have grown tired of their supernatural powers, and they find Dr. Franz Edelman to get them a cure for their condition. In his attempt to help out Dracula and Wolfman, Edelman develops a condition himself, which complicates things further. Meanwhile, Dracula is also attempting to seduce Edelman's nurse, and it is all boiling down to a comedy of errors. The typical all-star monster extravaganza does not disappoint, and Universal stays true to its best hits from the 40s. John Carradine as Dracula is quite effective in the role, and he gives it his own spin instead of trying to mimic Bela Lugosi. Equally impressive is Lon Chaney Jr. as the Wolfman, and the Frankenstein monster in the final moments of the movie is the cherry on the cake. House of Dracula is the last entry in the Universal Monster series, and for many, it doesn't match up to the excellence of the former entries. That being said, it is still a fun and engaging watch that we strongly recommend for anyone who loves the typical Universal brand of horror from the 40s. Billy the Kid vs. Dracula, 1966. If you stayed with us so far into the video, you have probably lost count of the number of crossovers that included Dracula, and we bring you yet another in the form of Billy the Kid vs. Dracula. The story is about Dracula's attempts to turn the fiancée of Billy the Kid, Betty Bentley, into one of his vampire brides. He impersonates as her deceased uncle and goes about his scheme, and Billy must save the love of his life before it's too late. The only trouble for Billy is that Dracula cannot be killed by regular means, and he is up against a force too mighty. Can he still save the day? The movie is rated poorly for a reason, and we wouldn't try to defend the lousy effort with kind words. However, it is still a fun crossover, and we all enjoy certain movies that are too campy and poorly made as guilty pleasures. This is all goofy stuff, but monster movie buffs might still get a kick out of this one. John Carradine plays Dracula one more time, but he himself admitted that Billy the Kid vs. Dracula is one of his worst movies. The ambiance is juvenile at best, and the silly and cheesy vampire action is not meant to impress everyone. As far as crossovers go, this is only watchable if you believe in bad movie goodness. Puppet Master vs. Demonic Toys, 2004. Robert Toulon, the great-grandnephew of Andre Toulon, and his daughter Alexandra have gotten their hands on the puppets and bring them to life on Christmas Eve. Meanwhile, Erica Sharp is the head of a toy-making factory, and she has some sinister plans to dominate the world. She takes notice of the success of Robert Toulon, and she finally has the perfect idea to fulfill her ambitions. Erica wants to make use of the puppets because the demonic toys that she possesses are not loyal. She even summons the demon Bale for the same. But it all ends up in a chaotic climax where these familiar horror movie components are all brought together. This movie is the first installment in the franchise that is not led by Charles Band, and the result is an underwhelming project that leaves a lot to be desired. The movie has its moments, but it still doesn't do justice to the legacy of the Full Moon series. The narrative is predictable, and the fight scenes are silly and funny. It is Corey Feldman who makes this movie watchable because of his performance, and the only way to enjoy this film is to treat this as a fun and humorous Christmas horror flick for the holiday season. Boa vs. Python, 2004. Creature horror movies were enjoying a successful run during this decade, and this movie is one of the many that tried to cash in on the craze behind the genre. The story creates quite a unique crossover as well, when a genetically altered python is pitted against a bioengineered boa constrictor. It all starts after the python escapes and causes a reign of terror before the FBI is called in. A scientist is asked to help out, and he owns a giant boa constrictor, which is employed to kill the python. Will the plan work as the two powerful opponents face off? There are campy and corny B-movies, and then there are movies like this one, which fall a category further. All the movie offers is fan service, be it in the form of scantily clad women stepping into the shower or ridiculous monster action with laughable effects. To say the CGI is poor would be an understatement, because the makers have made a mockery of the titular predators. With so much going against the movie, why have we even featured it on the video? Well, the only potential reason to check out this bad apple would be to discover the new lows that B-movies can attain, and to laugh at the ridiculousness of the entire movie. Rhino Croc vs. Supergator, 2010. Two ravenous mega reptiles and mighty predators are released accidentally from a research facility in Hawaii. The tourists on the beaches become easy prey for the mighty creatures, and it is up to 3 defenders to put an end to this threat. Of course, the task is easier said than done, and bodies pile up in quick time as the creatures create quite a ruckus in the tourist hub. The movie was released on Sci-Fi, and going by the usual standards of sci-fi movies, this one is not all that disappointing. Yes, there are some undeniably cheesy moments, and the whole plot is made to sell out to the creature feature lovers. But as far as B-movies go, it is still a decent effort. It is wonderful to see 2 gargantuan reptiles causing all that violence, even though the rough and crude CGI effects are laughable. You all get plenty of pretty ladies moving around in bikinis if the creatures don't do it for you, and all in all, it is an enjoyable flick if you have a few beers and low expectations while watching.
You did well, Igor.
Jesse James Meets Frankenstein's Daughter, 1966. The evil granddaughter of Dr. Frankenstein, Maria, has moved to the American West, and she kills children and replaces their brains with artificial ones. Her brother Rudolph is reluctant to help her in this sinister act, but he is scared of her and is forced to oblige. Things take a turn when an infamous outlaw, Jesse James, arrives in town with Hank Tracy, his dim-witted henchman. When Maria transplants an artificial brain inside the skull of Hank, things become personal for Jesse, and we have the epic standoff that is the highlight of this crossover. The story is intriguing, but we have to admit the execution has been below par. However, while the ratings of the movie are abysmal, it is not as awful as people make it out to be. The acting performances are terrible, but you get to see that in most B-horror flicks. As far as the seriousness of the movie is concerned, the makers make an attempt to lay out the narrative appropriately. Also, having a mix of horror and western is a good deal for many, and it's not often that you get to witness Frankenstein's evil daughter in the mix of things. Overall, it is a movie worth passing time, and it is especially recommended if you love unexpected crossovers. We would love to hear your thoughts on the horror crossover genre, and also tell us about your favorites from our list. Do share in the comments below which new horror crossover you would like to see in the near future. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe out there. Thanks, everyone.